Ken here, your thrifty apprentice, and welcome back to another Let's Talk Stick Friday. For today's stick product, I'm working with some watercolor brush pens I recently had the chance to crack open. Now, I have had these on hand for well over a year, and of course, when I get around to using them, they aren't in stock. So I will be holding off on reviewing these until they are available, if they ever become available again. Colorit happens to have made a mark for themselves in the budget art world, so it would be my guess that they will probably be back in stock sooner or later. I decided I would play around with a little fantasy and create my own watercolor tubes today, or should I say design them anyway. So I sketched out a trio of tubes and I just let my imagination do the rest. Now, for those who don't know, watercolor brush pens they are a fun product that uses dye-based water-soluble ink, allowing you to use them as you would a watercolor. The colors in watercolor brush pens are normally really bright and transparent, as to be expected from a dye-based ink. They contain ink pads that hold the ink, and it's suggested to store them on their sides when not in use. With that said, all brush pens are not created equally, as you would expect from any art product. Some of them are really good, and some of them, well, they're not so good. Now, Colorit happens to be the first company that I am aware of anyway to produce a refillable watercolor brush pen, providing their customers with refills that can be purchased separately and used to prolong the life and the usability of the actual pen itself. Now, of course, you can refill them with any brand of water-soluble dye-based ink that you want. Now, unfortunately, due to them being dye-based, they are not very light fast, or should I say not light fast at all. So brush pens wouldn't be the product that I would suggest for any commission-based work. Well, that is, unless you disclose it to your client first and they're okay with that. I personally only use them in a sketchbook or journaling or for card making. However, they can be used for bullet journaling, painting small compositions, and much, much more. Of course, when it comes to compositions, I would suggest that it's something small to prevent from using all of your ink at once. Well, not unless you are planning to refill the pen, if the pen is even refillable at all, because they all are not. As a matter of fact, Colorit is the only one that I know that promotes the pen being refillable. I am illustrating on 100% cotton paper, yet I did notice that the pens feathered a little bit. Actually, they did the same thing on cellulose paper, even more so on cellulose paper, if I'm being honest. Like I said earlier, I will get around to a review if and when they are back in stock. I don't want to have to add them to my, where are they now review series. At this point, I've used several of the colors. I've painted in the smaller tube, and now I'm just illustrating the biggest tube of the three. The brush pen dye in this particular one, with all of the good things about it being refillable, I did not find it to be as user friendly, should I say, as maybe some dyes in other watercolor brush pens. Now, most of them use the same numbering system, same ink system, should I say, which is why I said earlier that you don't necessarily have to refill it with the Colorit refill. You can pretty much refill them with any dye-based ink that you want. I personally, once the ink has run out of all of these, am more than likely going to see what it's like to refill them with liquid watercolor, since it's water soluble as well, and you want to be careful. Don't try to, I wouldn't try to dilute like regular watercolors, maybe half pans or tubes, because I don't believe the pigments in that particular type of watercolor is milled fine enough to actually filter itself through the brush tip. So liquid-based watercolors or dye-based inks are going to be the best things because they're already produced to come through brush heads and products of this nature. Now, the other brush pens that I'm really familiar with are, of course, Jane Davenport's Mermaid Marker. There is Parku watercolor brush pen, which we've reviewed on the channel before. And then, of course, the infamous Stettler watercolor brush pen, which is probably my most viewed video on my entire channel. And I will be sure to link all of those just in case anybody wants to go back and see what it's like, with another brand of brush pen. Now, I got in a really nice gray tone. There's only one gray marker in this 24 set, but it's very usable. And I did notice that the more you go over a particular layer, the more opaque or the darker that color will become. But I definitely suggest that when you're trying to build opacity, especially with just one color, instead of having a duo or a trio of colors, that you allow the first layer to dry completely, then go back in and try to build your opacity, try to build your tone on top of that. They don't disperse the best in water. They're not the worst that I've ever tried, but they don't disperse the best. I think for me, the biggest plus sign for these pens are that they're refillable. The barrel is super, super nice and thick and durable. They're encased in a really nice nylon carrying case that helps keep them compact for traveling or for carrying them around. The caps snap on really tightly and securely, but then they're not really hard to remove either. So these are just some of the qualities about this particular set of brush pens that I like. But if you have a set of brush pens already, they will work. I know a lot of people have the Jane Davenport mermaid markers, and this is pretty much the same concept. Now, the brush head on these is a real brush tip. They're individual fibers. So you're going to get the flexibility that you would get if you were using a regular watercolor brush when you're using these. Now, the thing to be aware of is that sometimes when it comes to watercolor brush pens, you may get a tip on it that is felt, which will tend to wear down a lot quicker than a real brush pen will. So, all of these are different qualities that come about with this particular product. Now, you see I'm working on the very last of the paint tubes here, and it's two of my favorite colors. I love this color combination of green and yellow. I've always been a really big fan of it, and more than likely, if I was to ever really produce my own paint set or have my own paint set curated or whatever, I would really want the tubes to look like either the one in the middle or the green and yellow one on the extreme end. The blue tube was just kind of me playing around, but I really, really, really had fun. Now, I did say earlier that the dye-based ink in this particular brush pen feathers quite a bit, meaning that, it kind of disperses out and spreads out with the more ink you use. And if you're doing a lined project, that could present a problem because it may feather out beyond the line, although you didn't intend it to. Now, what I typically do when I'm using things like any type of marker, to be exact, whether it's an alcohol marker or a watercolor brush pen or a regular watercolor marker, I tend to do my project first, because I have the tendency for my projects to grow. The things I paint may get bigger because I obscured a line here or I messed up a line there. So I typically save my inking to the very, very end. That way I can kind of encase some of those little itty bitty nuances that kind of got on my nerve during the entire painting process. And then I don't have to worry about trying to correct something that has somehow grown bigger and gone outside the lines that I inked in to begin with. So that's just a little tip. I mean, you don't have to do it that way, but that's just a little tip in the way that I tend to do things when I'm working with markers, just to help me out. Now here I'm going back in with that gray tone, and this is where I was telling you, you give it time to dry, and then you can go back in with the exact same color and actually build more opacity and more saturation to make it look like you had a much wider variety of pens and colors than you actually do. They mix together really, really well. So guys, that's pretty much gonna get me to the end of this video. I've babbed enough, and hopefully you guys were able to follow along with the tutorial or demo, should I say, without any issues. If you found anything in this video that you liked or just enjoyed hanging out, learned anything, or just happy to hear about the brush pens because maybe it's a product you've never tried, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. It's going to help the algorithm. It's going to help the channel grow. If you're new and haven't subscribed or returning and haven't subscribed, go ahead, subscribe, hit that notification bell, check the video description for all relevant links. And remember, as I tell you, just keep painting and crafting.